Hello. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Now We're Really Talking. Today, I'm joined by a close friend of mine, Mathew Hulbert. We talk about his journey through life and how he's been impacted by mental health challenges. Just a quick content note before we begin. This episode discusses grief, loss, and near-death experiences. If it gets too much, please take a break or skip this episode. If you need support, you can contact Samaritans on 116123 or text SHOUT to 85258 or visit mind.org.uk for resources. Remember, you are not alone. Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Now We're Really Talking, the podcast where we deep dive into mental health journeys. And today I'm really excited to be joined by Mathew Hulbert. And I'm excited for a couple of reasons, really. One, he's one of my favourite people in the whole wide world. And two, I think he's got a brilliant, unique perspective on mental health. I think he's the epitome of positive masculinity and, somebody I really look up to. So, Mathew, how are you doing?
Hi. Well, this is so exciting. And Paddy, thanks so much for inviting me onto your fantastic new podcast. And first of all, congratulations on it. It's so amazing. And, there's no more important issue, I don't think really today than the mental health of all of us. And I do mean all of us. I think too many people think that mental health is someone else's issue, someone else's problem. And all of us have mental health, whether it happens to be good or not good at any point in time, is somewhat something for individuals to think about. But we all have mental health, and we can all have mental health issues, as I know, and no doubt we'll get into, Paddy. All it takes is one big life event and you can suddenly find your mental health takes a big hit. So, and I also just want to say, Paddy, that without this being too much of a kind of mutual loving, I just want to say that, you two are also one of my favourite people in the whole wide world. I guess we've known each other for probably around about a year and a half, maybe 2 years now. And I just think, all the amazing work that you're doing, campaigning on this issue is incredible. And, we can maybe get into kind of how we met and everything. But just to let the folks watching or listening to this know that I refer to you as my little bro. Now, you're obviously not my brother, but I think of you. I think of you as family. So yeah, great to be with you.
Well, thank you. The same with you. You're my big bro, and yeah, it's so exciting to kind of be on this journey. Those listening might think, oh, this Mathew, he's got a voice for radio. And can you kind of explain why they're probably right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started doing hospital. So I'm 45 now. I know I don't look it. I know. I'm 45 now, and really can't believe I'm that age. I'm so middle aged now. It's a worry, but I am. And I started doing hospital radio when I was 17. So all the way back in 1997, I joined hospital radio in the August of 97. And I've always kind of loved the media. I've always devoured the media. And we can obviously get into whether the media, especially social media, is a good thing or not these days. But I've always loved the media and how it works and reporting and all of that. And so I got into hospital radio when I was 17. I then went off to uni at 19 to do broadcast journalism at Nottingham Trent. Had a great time there. Not even so much to do with the course, really, although I enjoyed that perfectly well. But I wrote for the student newspaper, was on the student radio. I just loved all of that. And then I worked in radio. I mean, actually, for a comparatively brief time, I guess, really, in the great span of things. I worked in local commercial radio for about 5 years, from 2004 to 2009. I got the chance to read the news at the top of the hour on commercial music stations in the Midlands. I got to interview people. I interviewed 2 prime ministers. I interviewed all sorts of pop stars and sports people. And I mean, it was an incredible 5 years. Then sadly, a new boss came in for the company and a whole load of us were made redundant. And I was one of those. And my life took a bit of a turn then. I got into I changed my job, so I started working for a charity that I still work for now. And as you know, Paddy, I then got into local politics as well. So yeah, I mean, again, life events, right?
Yeah, for sure. And now you currently have two podcasts. One's recently newly launched. So can you just explain a little bit more about those two podcasts?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah. So Political Frenemies, and I'll explain why it's called that in just a second, but that's been literally just celebrated its first anniversary this past week. A year of doing it. I can't, but for anyone who knows about it, they'll understand this. I can't know why I put up with Dr. Chris Newton, my co-host, for a whole year. No, but the reason we started doing this podcast is that I don't quite know how me and Chris became friends, because we agree on basically nothing, right? I'm a kind of lefty liberal Democrat. He's a right-wing kind of conservative. It shouldn't really work, but it does, and we do get on. Personally, we do get on perfectly fine. And we decided to take our offline chats online in the form of a podcast. Basically, the whole point of the show, the whole reason why we call it Political Frenemies, is that we have very, very robust debates sometimes, but we always remain friends at the end, because actually we think, and I think this is important for the theme of this podcast, is that, it's never personal between us. We disagree on policy, very strongly sometimes, but actually we always get on. We always remain friends at the end, and so we are political frenemies. That's the point of the podcast. And then my very recent one, we're just on episode 2 of it, is with our mutual friend, and it was great to be able to introduce another of my friends to you and for you to become friends, Andy Chandler, who is a very, very dear friend of mine. And yeah, so me and Andy do Mathew and Andy, and we think of it as like a cozy jumper or a warm cuppa of a podcast. So it's two friends chit-chattering away, because me and Andy both love to chat. And so we just talk about what we've got up to, and a little bit of politics, a little bit of people, a little bit of what we've been watching, listening to and reading. And it's just a lovely 60 minutes or so of chit-chat.
Oh, yeah, I think, warm jumper is a really good description. It's like us three have been to Nando's together, and it's like me being sat there, just listening to you two chat is really nice. And I think both of the podcasts are really interesting, as you kind of alluded to, for this chat, and for mental health in different reasons. So I'll start with the political frenemies, and you mentioned about social media, and you're quite active on Twitter or X, and I think it's fair to say you get a lot of kind of stick on there, and there's a lot of horrible trolls, and some of the stuff I think we've spoken, and it's kind of water off a duck's back, in terms of maybe politics and that kind of thing, but some of the stuff is really, really horrible. How do you cope with receiving that? And it's not once or twice. How do you cope with regularly receiving that kind of communication?
I mean, I think it used to bother me more than it does now, to be honest, Paddy. I tend to just block these people in as much as you can now. On you can't fully block people, but they just can't engage with you. So I tend to just block people and then get on with my day. There's occasions when it bothers me. I mean, no doubt we'll get into a little bit of what happened to my dear mum later on, so I don't want to preempt that too much. Sometimes people have said the vilest things to me about me and my life and my mum, who don't know me, who didn't know her, who have no awareness of the situation. And that is not just trolling, that is kind of really cruel. And yeah, I mean, I can't pretend that I've not on occasion, had a good cry as a result of what has been said to me. But what I have to remember, Paddy, and my advice, what it's worth, is these people don't know you. These people, why do you give credence to the views of these people? And I use people because I'm being polite. Why do we care about what these people think? They're just kind of. Yeah, I'm a big fan, Paddy, of that great Maya Angelou phrase: when people show you who they are, believe them. When people show you who they are, believe them. And these people are showing us who they are, and who they are is nasty trolls. And so I try I don't always succeed, but I try my very best to just block them and get on with my day.
Yeah. I think it's so important, and especially when you contrast that to what you do on the podcast and actually agreeing or disagreeing agreeably. Myself as well, when you care passionately about something and you disagree, and somebody disagrees or is horrible about it, it can really knock your kind of sense of self and your own self-worth. Then coming on to your second, more recent podcast with you and Andy, one thing I love about you and Andy, and the way you kind of interact and you in general with me and other friends, is you're really not afraid to say to men, your male friends, that you love them,
Right.
and be really affectionate and just tell your friends how you feel about them, which I think it's becoming more common, but it's still quite rare. Why do you think it's so important to do that?
I think it's really important. I think that, you could do a whole podcast on kind of masculinity and toxic masculinity and what it means to be a man today. And, I think it's an increasingly important issue, especially when you consider, Paddy, the tragic reality that 80 plus men a week in this country, men under 50, are taking their own lives, the biggest killer of men under 50. And why that isn't, a national emergency, a national priority, I really don't know. And I speak of someone who lost a dear friend that way, and who lost a cousin, albeit one that I must admit I didn't know, because the family had moved to America. Not someone I met, but I also lost a cousin, a male cousin, that way too. So it's very, very personal to me. And so I think when you have, and I think men are kind of okay with telling their dads that they love them, maybe even okay with telling their brothers that they love them sometimes, depending on how well they get on or not. I don't think they're used to saying to their mates that they love them. Now, I'll be honest with you, it might be easier for me as a gay man. I don't know. It might just be more reflexively kind of easier for me to tell other men that in my life that I love them. But I think nonetheless it's an important thing to do. And I guess I know that with you and Andy, I'm in a safe space. I'm in a space with people who feel the same way about me, and so I guess it's a safe thing to say. But I think it's something that needs to be said only if you mean it. But with you and Andy, I do, and I also just think about this. I lost my mum, and no doubt we'll talk about that. But also early this year, I very nearly died in March, and so it just reminded me that life can be short, and when you're here, you should tell those that you hold dear, those that give your life fulfillment and enrichment and enjoyment. You should tell those people that you love them, and men should do that too.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it shows the kind of person you are as a whole, that you are very open with how you feel and what you're going through. And has that always been the case when you were growing up? Were you open about your mental health and your feelings, or is it something that's is relatively new to you?
I think that's a really interesting question. I think some things have always, how I've always been. So I think I take after my mum in that way. You always knew how mum was feeling. Now, you also knew when she was upset, and you also know when she considered that you'd done something that she wasn't pleased with. She was never kind of backward coming forward, my mum, which I think is why I'm like I am. My dad was, I think he had to be, but my dad was much more placid, much more of a placid character. So I think really I take after my mum in many respects. But no, I mean, again, I think I reflect on this quite a lot, actually, Paddy. I think I do lots of public-facing stuff. I do the podcasts. I'm in quite rambunctious debates on certain TV and radio stations. I write a lot for public consumption. I do a lot of public-facing stuff. I like the debates. This is the only time you'll ever hear me say this, but I'm a bit like Piers Morgan in that respect. Piers Morgan always says that he likes being in there. He likes being part of the debate. He likes being part of the national conversation. And I absolutely like that. Too. I kind of live for it to an extent. But I don't personally, I don't know if Piers Morgan would agree with this bit, which is why we're different, but I don't personally think you can do that without also being very aware of like your own self and what you're going through, and because I want to be honest with my viewers and listeners, whether they agree or disagree with me politically, and very many people disagree with me. I want them, I hope to think that I may disagree with Mathew Hulbert, but actually he's authentic. He tells us what he thinks. He lets us know how he feels. He's been very honest about, what's happened to himself and to family members. And actually, I have respect for that, even if I vehemently disagree with his liberal views. So, I mean, all I can do is try, but I hope that's what I succeed in doing.
Yeah, I think for sure you do. And kind of off the back of that point, this podcast about mental health, and when's the first time that you can pinpoint in your life actually struggling with your mental health?
Yeah, so I can tell you exactly. I mean, we all go through ups and downs. There's everyday ups and downs, isn't there? But I think in a kind of quite major way, it would have been in 2009 when I lost so I had what at the time I considered my worst week ever. So I was being told I was made redundant on the Monday from the radio, and then my gran died on the Tuesday, so the very next day. So my beloved gran, Bessie Hulbert, at the grand old age of 90. And, she was someone absolutely pivotal in my life. I can't believe it's, so many decades now that since she died. But yeah, I always think that was like my worst week up to that point. And that really affected my mental health. And then when my dad died in 2016, October 2016, 9 years ago, that affected my mental health too, and then obviously more recently the death of my mum. So for me, it's all been around kind of the loss of someone that I love, and we all go through that. That is life. Death is part of life. But when it's someone that you love, that is obviously really, really, really difficult. And I don't know who came up with this phrase, Paddy. You can perhaps tell me, but I think someone said that grief is love with no place to go. And I think that is real. I think that is really true. It's love that wants to find the person that the love is there for, and it can't because that person is gone. And so I've got a phrase. I'm sure I didn't come up with this, but it's something that I always say to people when they lose someone close to them, that you don't get over something like that. You just learn to live with the pain, and that's what I've done.
Yeah, I think that both of those quotes are really powerful, and there is something very normal about grief. As you say, it's kind of the natural way of the way that life works. Unfortunately, knowing that it's natural and knowing that everybody's going to go through it doesn't make it any easier, does it? And kind of going back to 2009 and when or 2016 when you've really struggled, how did that struggle manifest itself in your day-to-day life?
Yeah, I mean, obviously in 2009, it was a dual set of circumstances. I lost my gran. Obviously, not that this makes loss any easier particularly, but she'd lived a long life. She was 90 years old. She'd lived a good life. And so it was a sadness, but it wasn't a tragedy in that sense. She'd lived a long, fulfilling life with a great family who loved her very much. I think it was the duality of that happening a day after I'd been made redundant and told that I'd be losing my job in the radio, which I loved. And I think when you find yourself in a situation like that, you don't think that life will ever sort itself out again. Of course, you reflect back on it now and think that all of the opportunities that I've had since then, it was probably something that I want to have had the chance to do the politics or any of it, probably, if that hadn't have happened to me. But at the time, you think your world's come to an end, and you've got to kind of rebuild from scratch. So I think that was really, really tricky. With my dad dying, he was still, I guess, what you'd consider to be an old man in his 70s, but that was sad, and we'd known that he'd been ill for quite a time, so I was able to prepare for that. I think with my mum 2 or 3 years ago, it was a much more devastating situation, as you know, Paddy.
Yeah, and let's move on to that, because I think it's how we met. And is when you talk about the things that happen through these bad experiences, and we've often had the conversation where we'd never wish to have gone through these circumstances, but it has, and they've happened, and we are where we are now. Just tell me, first of all, because I think anybody like looking at social media, you or anything you've done, they can see the kind of impact of your mum on you, not just for kind of the tragic events that have happened, but also because of the person she was. So can you explain a bit more about who the kind of person your mum was?
Yeah, absolutely. She was a very, very, so Jackie Hulbert. Yeah, she was a very, very loving person. She was very open. I think that's where I get it from. And as I say, if you upset her, you knew about it. But equally, she could be and always was extraordinarily loving as well. And she was a much loved mum, a much loved grandma, someone that even at 78, which was the age that she was when she died, she was a kind of young 78, if you could be that, a young in spirit 78. She loved going to church. She loved going with her friends to see live music in the village. She was still had a life to live, So she was a remarkable person. So her and my dad split up when I was just 11 and got divorced. And although I always saw my dad, he was never not in my life. It was basically me and mum from that point forward. And so, in a sense, albeit my dad was still around, really my mum single parented me, for all those years. So losing her in any circumstances would have been absolutely devastating. The fact that I lost her in the circumstances that I did, which maybe you wanted to come on to, just compounded how bad that was.
Yeah, I think, as you say, and any kind of loss of somebody like that, especially when you are so close to them and in the circumstances. And can you just kind of explain a little bit more about the kind of what happened and why it was so kind of traumatic?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So, July 10th, 2022, I was called a Sunday morning. I'd seen Mum the previous day. I'd been over to her house because she'd asked me to water the plants. So I'd been over to the house and water the plants, and we'd had I always remember my mum would always say, "Oh, Matthew, put that kettle on." She'd always say. So we'd had a cuppa, and then I'd gone back home, and then in the early hours of the following morning, the Sunday, I got a call because Mum had fallen before. She was quite frail by this stage. At times, and so she had one of these council things that you could press if you'd fallen. So I was contacted by the council here at home. A friend got me over to Mum. She'd fallen getting out of bed to go to the toilet. She was in quite a state. She said she'd hurt her ribs, so when we called for an ambulance, we were told not to move her because, again, some of the trolls, Andy, or some of the people who think that they're being clever after the fact have kind of chastised me. I mean, just imagine doing this, right? Have chastised me for not just kind of picking Mum up and taking her off to the hospital. That's what I would have done. I've had these people say, well, the advice was not to do that we could have made matters worse. So we didn't do that. As I said, we called for an ambulance, expecting an ambulance to arrive within a few hours. Mum was breathing, so she wasn't an emergency case at that time. But in actual fact, it was 11 hours before a paramedic finally arrived. 11 absolutely agonizing hours that I'll never forget until my dying day. With Mum consistently asking me, begging me, when is help going to come, and me not being able to tell her, and calling an ambulance calling 999 every few hours to say, where is this ambulance? My mum is deteriorating. What is going on? And then a paramedic finally arrived. So we called for an ambulance at 5 a.m. At 4 p.m, a paramedic finally arrived in a car, checked Mum over, further called for an ambulance, which then arrived shortly after that. Mum was taken to hospital, and she died 2 days later after an infection turned to sepsis.
Yeah. It's It's so kind of heartbreaking, I remember when I first heard your story and heard it all, I couldn't help but hold back the tears. It's I think about my own kind of parents, and yeah, it's completely like tragic. And when you were talking about kind of the memory of it, I felt like a pang in my chest, because I can feel that you've reliving that experience and reliving it daily. And I think most people's response to that kind of thing, when looking at it, you feel like 11-hour wait. If it had been an hour wait, or half an hour wait, or 2 hours wait, there's all the what ifs. How do you deal with the kind of, was there any anger? Was there frustration just at the world at what had happened?
There was lots of anger. And, a lot of people have said to me, and I think this is a perfectly fair question, did you not formally complain? And I didn't formally complain. Me and my siblings, my sister and my brother, did think about it, but we decided actually that would just be another load of trauma added on to trauma. But what I did do was write to, I won't name them, but I did write to the local ambulance service. I just wanted it set out in writing what they were facing on that day, what was going on that day, what the issues were. Because obviously, I've been in politics and public policy for a very long time. I've often debated at a theoretical level what is going on with the health service, and this was it really impacting on me and my family. And so I just wanted to know what was going on. And it took a while, but I did get a lengthy response from this ambulance service in which they set out what I'd already surmised, which was that ambulances were backed up outside a local hospital, unable to offload patients, and they were unable to do that because there were patients in the hospital well enough to go home, but who didn't have a care package for them at home or in the community. So, as you would have heard me say many times, Paddy, when I've been interviewed about this, it's a whole system failure that let my mum and others down on that day. But you're quite right. Me and my siblings and our family will never know if mum might still be here today if an ambulance had arrived within 3 or 4 hours rather than 11 hours. And, I don't allow myself at any great length to think about that, because number one, it's a great unknowable. I will never know. And number two, it's just upsetting. And again, it just adds trauma onto trauma. I've had to, as you know, Paddy, but for the benefit of your listeners, I think last year I did something like 40 some odd interviews about what happened to mum. Not because I want to be having to retell the story, but I can't get onto the issues of the NHS today without having to tell that story. And for a long time, I thought I could tell it and it not greatly affect me. What I've come to learn is that actually every time I talk about it, it affects me. And it's a bit different now because I'm talking to a very dear friend about it. But I know that later today, in private, I'll probably have to have a good cry to help make myself kind of feel better. And so I now know that I can't talk about it with it not affecting me. And I think that was a realization that I had to come to. I thought that I could just kind of say what happened, and not feel really deeply about it. But I've realized that I can't do that. I think you've got to be honest with yourself.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's similar in terms of any kind of journey and story that's been traumatic. I know myself, you sometimes forget that this is your story that you're retelling, and these aren't just characters in a book. These are people who are dear to you, and it is helpful to realise that this is having an impact on you, whether you know it or not. So going back to the days and the first few weeks after your mum passed away, how did you, because it was so devastating and the way that it happened was so kind of traumatic, how did you get through those first few weeks?
Well, I think, to be honest, Paddy, not very well. And again, this is something that I've reflected on in hindsight. So I'm a big guy, right? And one of the reasons that I am is because I was a pretty big guy anyway, but it was because I comfort ate. I found comfort in eating, and that became quite unhealthy. I'm still quite big now. I've got a ways to go, but I became very big. I got up to 29 stone. I'm now down to 23, which I'm really proud of myself for. And I know my mum would be too, and feeling much healthier and very much happier. So I found, I mean, part of me that was bad enough, but part of me thinks that I could have turned to much worse addictions. And I'm pleased that I didn't. Would never condemn those that do, but I'm pleased that I didn't. And in actual fact, that's what led to me finding out this year, and again, quite a traumatic. Well, I don't want to make it sound like my life is full of trauma. It really isn't, but I've just had a couple of moments that have been traumatic. So in March this year, and by the way, I've got no recollection of this, like 24 hours or whatever it was. So, but people have told me that I didn't turn up for work. Work obviously called me to find out where I was. Apparently, I was making no sense whatsoever on the phone. So work said, Matthew, we're going to put the phone down, stay in your flat, going to send someone to find out what's going on. Apparently, I was completely kind of out of it. Called for an ambulance. An ambulance arrived in a timely manner, so it just goes to show that the NHS can sometimes work. Was taken to hospital. Woke up the next day, whatever it was, kind of hooked up to lots of machines. And the upshot was that something that I really should have known was that I was type 2 diabetic, and that I'd had what I believe they call a hypo, a really bad one. And the doctor made very clear to me, I think she wanted to shock me or just kind of make me realise the situation. But she said to me that had this have happened at a weekend so I live by myself, had it have happened at a weekend when I'd not been due to see anyone necessarily, or see family or whatever, and not necessarily have anyone kind of, check on me, that I could have died. So, you don't need to be told that twice, do you? Well, you're a very foolish person if you do need to be told something like that twice. And so ever since then, I've totally changed. It kind of jolted me into reality, and I've changed what I eat and drink. I now walk a lot more and actually enjoy walking. It's been a bit of a revelation for me. That's been amazingly good for both my physical and my mental health. And as I say, I was 29 stone. I'm now 23, and I want to get down to about 18, 19 stone. So still a ways to go. But yeah, I mean, as I say, life events, Paddy. And I think as well, I think it's another thing for men, right? That sometimes when we know we've got a health issue. I didn't literally know I was type 2 diabetic, but I knew that I was too big. I did know that, I knew that reality. But quite often with men, they'll pretend that they've not got a health problem. They'll leave it till it's too late to do anything. They'll think, oh well, that whatever it is will go away, won't it? And of course it doesn't. And then they finally go to the doctor, and it's too late. And so we've really got to get better as guys of thinking that the doctor's not going to judge you, or rather, who gives a toss even if they do? They're there to help you and to try and get you better. And so if you think you've got a problem, even if it turns out not to be one, that's better than a few minutes embarrassment with your doctor is better than leaving something that is potentially life-threatening. So, I mean, I guess for me that, I didn't need to be told twice that I could have died. And so ever since then, I've changed my life. And so, that's been quite something as well. And, I mean, again, kind of, thanks to you and Andy and John and Michael and my niece Tyra and so many others for being there for me, over these months. So thank you.
Yeah, wow. It's an honour to call you a friend, and I'm so proud of how what you've done the last however many months, 6-7 months, like lose 6 stone. That's incredible. But I think by all accounts, again, I don't think you said earlier about kind of saying that your life's all traumatic. I think losing your mum in the way you did, and then being told that if it was a different day, you could have died as well. I think anybody would find it incredibly traumatic. And I guess so you lost your mum, and then you had your own kind of your face of your own mortality. How how did that change you, having that experience of, this is how close I was to not being here anymore? How did that change you mentally?
I think it's had a profound impact on me. I mean, it's made me think about my life, and it's made me think about family and friends in a renewed way. It's funny. I don't think I've ever spoken about this before, but I'm happy to do so with you, Paddy. So after Mum died, I had grief counselling for quite a while. It was, and I'd love to say that I got it on the NHS, because I believe in the public NHS, and I don't really believe in private provision. I don't think it should be necessary. But the truth was that I needed that counselling then. I couldn't go on some kind of waiting list, so I paid for some private sessions. It's funny, isn't it? You go into these sessions thinking that you'd just be talking about your feelings about what happened to your mum, and then you end up going complete curveballs and everything. And one of the things that I spoke to my therapist about, that I'm happy to share, is that I had, and I know this is weird, right? But your brain you can know that something is not the case, right? You can intellectually know that, but your brain can also make you think this is the case. So it's a weird thing. But I had real pangs of guilt that I hadn't done a number of things that that I now think that my mum would have really loved. So, she didn't see me get married. I'm not married. I don't have children. And I don't know why I should suddenly, it was something that I'd never really thought about before my mum was alive. But obviously I'm a gay man, and obviously gay people can get married now, which is fantastic, and can have children, but it's a bit more of a difficult thing, for us. I've got siblings who have had children, so mum had grandchildren, so it's not like, I was her only child and she'd not had them. I think I would have felt guilty even more had that have been the case. But I had these real feelings of mum didn't get to see me do these things that most parents, in quotes, get to see their children do. And for a while, it really affected me. That she did see me graduate, and that was great. She saw me move into my own place, which was great. But other really profound kind of big life events that you expect your parents to be able to see and enjoy, I wasn't able to give to her. And for a long time, I felt really guilty about that. And even though I knew that my mum loved me regardless of any of that, it wasn't things that she ever raised with me. She just wanted to know that I was happy. But I think it's something about mental health that you can intellectually know something is not the case, but your brain can also tell you that it's a problem. And I think that would have really affected me had I not had that opportunity to discuss that with the therapist. I mean, again, what I'd say to anyone, and I think especially to men, is to not be afraid to go and seek professional help. If you need it. It can really work.
Yeah, I completely endorse that as somebody who has counselling each week. And yeah, it's funny you talk about the brain and convincing you of things that just aren't correct. And the brain is so powerful, and it can be powerful in such good ways, but also such kind of malign ways. And especially when you throw grief into the mix, it makes you think really, really weird things that you'd never considered. And it can be so helpful to kind of talk that through and actually realize that these are, it isn't just you're not being a bad person if you have these, like, some thoughts. It's very kind of normal to have them. So you've had this change, and you think the getting out, eating better, losing weight, do you think that has improved your mental health as well?
It absolutely has. And it's funny, and again, something that I don't mind sharing is that another thing that I discussed with my therapist that's pertinent to the question you've just asked is that we think that we didn't delve too much into this, I have to say, but I think it's true. I don't think I've actually discussed it with you, but I know that I've discussed it previously with my friend John before, that that I think, and again, I think it's a subconscious thing. I never consciously took the decision that I'm going to gain weight so that because I don't know how to describe this in a way that people won't like really question. So obviously I realised that I was gay when I was about 12 or 13. uh, but never thought a guy would find me attractive. Right? Never thought that I'd be loved in that way. Never thought that I'd meet someone who would want me as their partner. And I think I can't remember ever having. I can remember thinking that, but I can't remember ever having the conscious thought. And again, this is wrong because obviously beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and you can be beautiful and attractive any way, any size. So I'm really not being judgmental, and I really hope I get that across. People can be beautiful however they are, and it's about the person inside, and that's not a cliche, it really is. But I think for me, so I'm only talking about myself, I think I subconsciously kind of, I don't want to say made myself big, that sounds wrong, but ended up big, at least in partly to do with grief and all of that, but even before that, because it created like I can remember my therapist saying this, it created a kind of physical comfort blanket around me, or a protection from having to, I think what it was that, having suffered loss at various points throughout my life, the idea at the time of having to go through rejection from a potential romantic partner was not something that I could face, not that I wasn't strong enough to go through that. And so I made that not have to be an option by making myself in my own mind not someone that someone would find attractive. So that again was obviously not good. And I think it's not really something you should say about yourself, is it really? But I like to think that I've always been someone that people could love in terms of like my personality and the way I am who I am as a person. I don't think I was always kind of what might be perceived as, kind of attractive, kind of physically. And as I'm, losing weight, people have said, still a way to go, but people, I don't know if they're just being kind, but people have said to me, "Oh, you're looking so much better, Matthew, and you look better in the face," and, blah, 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 blah. And I've now started to finally, at 45, think that I'm someone that, a man, hopefully a good man, could find attractive and could want to be with. For me, that's a really big thing, actually. So yeah, I hope you don't mind me sharing that with you. I don't think that's something we've actually talked about before. So
I don't think I said that we probably need a part 2. I think we definitely need a part 2 at some point, because there's so much more to explore. And I think, the brain is just, the more and more I like think about my own brain and listen to other people talking about their brain, it's just kind of wild what it can do. And I think that it's, I'm really grateful for you sharing that.
Can I just add, sorry, very, very quickly, Paddy, that I think I've now given myself permission that I could be loved by someone in a romantic way, and in a way that could be a meaningful relationship. I think how can I put this? I think that, there's definitely people in my life that that I could see that happening. So and whether it will or not, we'll have to see. But I now know that I'm strong enough that I can face potential rejection, quote unquote, and still know that I'm a good person with a good life, and that it's just not meant to be with some people. So I think the fact that I'm in a space where I can actually allow myself that possibility, I think before I'd basically just close the door on that potential, which is basically closing the door on my potential happiness, which, is not good. And my mum would not have wanted that. My mum had no problem with me being engaged. So she always wanted me to find a partner. And the fact that, now, whether that does or doesn't happen, is one thing, but the fact that I have found a space mentally where I'm prepared for that eventuality is a really, really big thing for me. So, and again, I don't think this is the kind of thing that guys normally talk about, which I can't pretend I'm finding it easy, but I think it's important to do so.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that it's so good to hear that you've got to this place, and it's so important that you talk about it, because I think a lot of people do feel like that and feel like they're nervous about rejection and nervous about, will they find somebody? But it's just never talked about. You have to have this kind of macho confidence about it. So to hear somebody talk so openly is so refreshing. And the question I always ask people, if you could go back to Matthew in your darkest days, maybe the days just after your mum passed away, or when you've really struggled, what advice would you give him?
Oh, I think I'd just tell him to be kind to himself. And to be kind to himself, and also to I'd say, I did have professional therapy, and that really helped, but I think I could have leaned on friends more at the time than I did. I think I very much went into my shell in many respects. It was really ironic, actually, Paddy, because I've done all these kind of media interviews about what happened to Mum. And obviously I do those as me, obviously, but I think I also kind of steel myself for those few minutes that I have to do that. I think it was much less easy for me to actually talk to people in my actual life, in my real life, about what I was going through. And I think one of the reasons why it was so great why it's been so great to be part of Just Treatment, which is how me and you met, the campaign group for a better NHS. It's been great in terms of the campaigning. That's been wonderful. But actually, kind of more important for me has been the fact that I've met, especially yourself, but one or two other people as well, who I know that I can, turn to. Because again, I think doing public facing things, you can you can kind of steel yourself for those few minutes that you've got to do that. But I think how can I put this? I never got to the darkest place. Can I put it like that? Do you know what I mean by that?
Yeah.
I never got there, thank goodness. But it was pretty damn dark, and it was not good. And I shut a lot of people out that I shouldn't have at the time. And so I'd do these things that would be seen by thousands, if not millions. But then I'd retreat back into my bunker, which is effectively what my flat became for about a kind of a year. I wouldn't have anyone around. I wouldn't really talk to people. I wasn't really going out. And so actually getting involved with Just Treatment, and then and meeting yourself and others, and then reconnecting with other friends of mine, and then meeting Andy and others, has really enabled me to get out of that bunker and to start living my life again. And funny enough, my sister visited me the other day. My sister lives in Dubai, but she was over here in the UK. And she said to my niece, so me, her, and my niece met here in my flat, my niece Tyra, who you know, Paddy. And my sister told me later that she said to Tyra, "I've never known your Uncle Matthew so happy." And yeah, so again, I don't want to break down, but just the fact that my sister had, just and I have difficult days, and like all the rest of us, that's just life. But generally now, I'm a much happier person than I've been for a very long time. So thank goodness for that.
Yeah, that's such a lovely way, I think, to finish off. And we all have ups and downs, but to hear that you're doing well. Would you like to shout out your kind of channels and everything?
Yeah, so people can basically, if they search for Mathew Hulbert, but it's one T in the Matthew. I'll just end with this very quickly. I once said to my mum, why did you give me just one T in the Matthew? I said, basically means that my name is being misspelt like my entire life. And she'd obviously really thought about this, and it saddens me to say. She said, well, I said to your dad at the time that Matthew with two T's is Matt to you, And Matthew with one T is Matthew. I thought, oh my goodness, that just shines a spotlight into into my mum. Honestly, oh my goodness. But yeah, if people search for Mathew Hulbert, Matthew with one T, they'll find me. They'll find lots of articles about me pontificating about this, that, and the other. So they don't have to read them all. It's all right.
Oh, thank you. I'll leave them in the description with a few like kind of links and resources. And thank you, Matthew. I really appreciate you being so open, and we'll definitely have a part 2 at some point. And thank you everybody for listening. I really appreciate it, and I hope you found it interesting, insightful, useful, all of the above. So yeah, thank you, Matthew, and thank you everybody, and I'll catch you in the next one. Once again, thank you so much for listening to Now We're Really Talking. If anything in this episode has brought up difficult feelings for you, please reach out for support. You don't have to go through it alone. If you're in the UK, you can contact Samaritans on 116 123, or contact Shout by texting 85258, or visit mind.org.uk for mental health support. If you're listening from outside the UK, you can find international helplines at findahelpline.com. Remember, there's always help out there, and talking about it is a strength, not a weakness.